serving today as the chair for this committee. The other committee members, again, you can see them on the screen, but just a brief introduction is Sean Davidson, Daniel Fanton, Chuck Everin, and Deputy Mayor Barry Burton. The committee members are not employees or councillors of the Township of Clearview, with the exception of Deputy Mayor Burton. The hearing this morning will be conducted under the authority of the Building Code Act, Section 15, and the Township of Clearview Property Standards Bylaw 17-98. The purpose of the hearing this morning is to hear your appeal by Donald F. Lawson to the order issued by the Property Standards Officer on August the 10th, 2020. The order was issued to remove, and I quote, "a collection of debris and metal as set out in the order, in compliance with the standards set out in the bylaw by the appellant located at 7068 Highway 26, Stayner, Ontario. Further information pertaining to this property standards order and accompanying the documentation can be found attached to the meeting agenda." The powers of this committee are the following, and they're very limited, but they're very specific. 1, we can confirm the order as written. 2, we could modify the order. 3, we can rescind the order. And 4, we can extend the time for complying with the order. That's basically our limitations. If you are satisfied with the decision of the committee, or sorry, if you are not satisfied with the decision of the committee, you may appeal this to the Superior Court of Ontario within 14 days of the decision being sent to you. So, sounds like a formality. We can see each other, but I would like the parties to please identify themselves, particularly as the parties being the Senior Bylaw Officer and Mr. Lawson. Joe, we'll start with you. Who are you? And
my name is Joe Paddock. I work for Clearview Township as the Senior Bylaw Enforcement Officer.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Lawson.
Yes, Fred Lawson.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lawson and Joe, are there any objections to any of the committee members that you've been introduced to and that you can see on the screen that will be sitting in on this decision today?
No.
Okay. Mr. Lawson?
No, as far as I know, I don't know anything.
Okay, thank you. Let the record show then that there were no objections to any of the committee members. All evidence that was presented today will be done so either under oath or under affirmation. So before we go any further, I would again stress to you the importance that your evidence is under oath, and Pam will now swear you in. You have a choice between an oath, sorry, Pam, you have a choice between an oath and an affirmation, one being a little bit more religious. Pam?
Thank you, Terrell. Mr. Lawson, would you like the oath or the affirmation?
Okay, I don't know.
Okay, well, we'll do the oath then. So do you swear that the evidence to be given by you at this hearing touching the matters in question shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Pam? Do you need the swear
Turning
in,
it back
Joe?
over to you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. At this time then, I'm just going to outline very, very quickly how the proceedings will take place, basically the agenda. So you will present both the Senior Bylaw Officer will present opening statements. Mr. Lawson, you'll be able to give us a brief opening statement as well. We will then proceed into providing evidence, which is kind of phase 2. And both of you will have an opportunity. At that time, the committee will have an opportunity to present questions. There will be a final argument. I prefer to call it maybe a final discussion and additional points. Let's call it that. And then finally, at the end of that phase, there will be an opportunity for the committee to make a decision. I'll give more details as we enter into each phase of the hearing. So we'll start off then with a brief opening statement. Notice the word brief. And we'll start with the bylaw officer, the property standards officer. So Mr. Paddock, if you would like to give us an opening statement, please.
Okay, thank you. So September 2019, council passed a resolution for proactive property standards enforcement. Shortly thereafter, I contacted Mr. Lawson, and this is almost a year ago now. And I said, hey, Fred, we got to clean up your property. You know, I'll give you the winter. I'll give you a few months to get it together. Mr. Lawson did. He rented a bin, and I believe he did get rid of some material. But come this year, it was still not up to what I believe to be the standards in the bylaw. And that's what led to the order being issued on August 10th.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joe. Mr. Lawson, an opening statement, again, just at this point in matter and time, relatively brief, but highlight your points.
Well, I have all the papers here for the stuff I've got rid of.
Anything further, sir? Okay. If not, we will move on to a little bit more detail by presenting kind of the evidence or additional information. And Mr. Lawson, you get to open this round. This is your opportunity to present us with as many details and facts as you can and that you would like to make before the committee this morning. So I turn the floor over to you, please, Mr. Lawson.
I'm in a meeting, Tom. Can I call you back?
Yeah, just call me back and we'll fill the screen.
Okay. Mr. Lawson, please go ahead.
Okay, I was told to bring all my papers that I have taken the stuff to the landfill and to the metal place. And I've got them, all the papers here with me.
Is that all that you would like to, all the, anything else that you would like to make at this point? Any other arguments that you'd like to make at this point?
I'd like to put a fence up, but I can't. I've been into Hamilton's. I've been all over to get pressure treated for a fence, 6 feet high, and I cannot find nobody with material. I have got a fella that said he would put it up if I get the material. Well, I can't get the material. So I was wondering if I put a temporary garage up and have everything all inside.
Okay. If that's it, sir, then what I would like to do then is ask the committee members to present some questions to you before we move on to the Property Standards Office. So we'll start with you, Mr. Burton, since you've got your sign up. We're going to go around the horn anyways, but we'll start with Mr. Burton. Questions for Mr. Lawson, please.
Mr. Lawson, can you advise me how many trips to the dump that you made to the landfill? You said you got all your paperwork there. How many loads did you take to the dump?
3, I think it was.
3. And these were in a pickup truck, a trailer, or
Oh, half-ton truck,
a half-ton truck?
box.
Okay. And then you mentioned about putting up a temporary structure. You're talking like one of those car covering things, what I call garage in a box. Is that what your thought is? And you would put one of those up and then put your material in there until you were able to get your fence built and,
I've got we have a lot of stuff. We got 2 estates for yard stuff or for garage sales. But with this virus, we're not letting anybody in on the property.
yeah, so you're sort of, and I certainly understand the inability to get material, because I hear that quite frequently, that especially pressure treated material is quite difficult to come by. So your plan was to build a fence and still keep your stuff, or was it build a fence and some sort of structure to store it in?
No, just to keep it so nobody could see in.
Okay. I think that answers my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Sean Davidson next, please. Member Sean, if you have some questions.
Good morning, committee. Good morning, Fred, Joe. Fred, so I realize you mentioned the estates and you've been accumulating some of these things over time. Do you feel that a lot of it is saleable, that you can dispose of it in that fashion?
Yes, it is. I can, in a yard
And
sale, I can get rid of it.
okay. All right. Okay, I guess that's my only question of Mr. Lawson. I will potentially have a question of Mr.
Okay, thank you very much, Member Davidson. Let's move off to Member Phantom.
Mr. Lawson, my question is, this has obviously been going on long before COVID started. And when I look at older pictures from Google Maps, for example, that stuff's been sitting there for quite some time. You've failed to really kind of clean it up, and pressure treated has only been hard to get in the last few months. You've had an opportunity in the spring to put a fence up. You're failing to do anything up to this point, other than maybe getting rid of a very small fraction of what you've got there by going to the dump and the scrap metal. What's the reason for procrastinating on this?
I had pneumonia last winter, and I think I had the virus last winter, but they didn't know what it was.
So that was the last winter, but I mean, this has obviously been accumulating longer than that.
Yes.
But you just continue to collect this stuff.
Stuff that I can use, maybe.
Maybe.
Or sell.
I'm just struggling with the fact that you've had opportunities to deal with this stuff in the past couple of years, probably. That's not just a weekend of collecting stuff and all of a sudden it's there. I think that's all I have for questions, Dave.
Okay, thank you very much, Member Phantom. And Chuck, we'll take any questions that you may have for Mr. Lawson now, please.
The only question I have is, yes, pressure treated has been unable to yet. There are many alternatives for fencing, whether it's chain link with the plastic inserts, or just straight lumber and paint it. What is the objection to alternative fencing materials?
I have chain link fence there, but they want a wooden fence. I can't 6 months or in the springtime, you couldn't get pressure treated lumber to do anything.
Agreed. Pressure treated has sort of disappeared off the face of the earth for a while. But whether you build a wooden fence and put stain on it, painted it, a chain link fence with the plastic privacy weave through it. There are many alternatives, is the only question I have, which haven't been looked at in since this became an issue.
I have chain link fence there, brand new stuff. But they told me I couldn't use it because you can see through it.
Understandable. I'm good, Dave.
Okay, thank you very much, Member Aaron. I have a couple of very quick questions. The first question, and I'll give you a bit of a preamble, I guess, to some where it may be a little bit of a strange question. My first question is, and I know you don't have an exact answer, but I'm sure that you have some sort of concept of how long the process would take. So in your written response, in your appeal back to, or your request for this meeting, essentially today, you say, I am requesting additional time to be added to my order to comply to allow me to purchase a shed and have it built on my property. The additional time will allow me to get a proper building permit, site plans, purchase the necessary materials, build a shed, and store the items in a neat and tidy manner. All of that I understand. But Mr. Lawson, do you have any concept of how long that process would take, particularly if you are talking about building permits, site plans, et cetera, et cetera? How long would you be looking at to have this all completed?
I have no idea. All I know, if I can get a temporary garage, 2 days or 3 days would put it up. But the Canadian Tire will install them, and that's what I'll do, is get them to install them.
Okay, thank you. And then in the longer term, it probably is a fairly lengthy process to get the final, more permanent structure. Would you agree?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It'll take a while.
Yeah. I'm going to be, my next question is, so a little bit of preamble. It follows along and dovetails a little bit with what Mr. Burton asked you. So since you have received the order, what have you started to do and to move and so on and so forth? And what I'm looking for, I guess, is to try to establish some sort of good faith or intent to actually clean up the debris. So what I heard you answer, Mr. Burton, is that you've basically only taken away in the 1 month, month and a half, 6 weeks, whatever it's been since you received the order, you've taken away 3 half-ton trucks. Is that correct?
Yes, approximately.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, I've asked this before at some of these other hearings, is have you and the senior bylaw officer really ever had a discussion, a meaningful discussion about time? Because you know, and so does the senior bylaw officer, that basically you get a little over a month between when the order is written and perhaps when the work is to be completed. So I'm wondering, again, I'm looking at trying to establish good faith and intent. So have you ever contacted Joe and said, I got an issue, I'm going to need 6 months, I'm going to need 8 months? Have you ever tried to sit down and give a meaningful definition or a meaningful length of time to clean up this property?
I told him I would clean it up.
Okay, but never discussed with Joe a time frame that you felt comfortable with and that he, representing the township, may feel comfortable.
No, I got all the papers here for Creemore, for the loads I've taken over there.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else quickly that you would like to add, Mr. Lawson? This is kind of an extra 30 seconds that you may have, because you will have an opportunity in the next phase to also make any additional comments.
Okay, I've got a load to go to landfill Friday. And next week, I've got a load to go to Creedmoor.
Okay. Thank you very much. Senior Bylaw Officer Joseph Paddock, it is now your turn to provide some evidence with regard to what you saw, what you wrote in your report. So your turn, you have the floor.
Thank you. So as you can see in the pamphlet, the overhead photo there, you know, it's not only at the side of the house, it does wrap around to the back. I was out there this morning. I took some more pictures. I can share it with you guys if you like, if you haven't seen it. But if there's been material removed, it doesn't appear to be any large amounts. As for the fence, there was discussion about fence, but the purpose of the order is not to hide these items. It's to remove them from the property. I know Mr. Lawson believes that some of these things may have value, and they might, but the majority of the items appear just to be, you know, meant for the scrapyard. So the timeline, you'd asked a question about the timeline there. I spoke to Mr. Lawson back in September of 2019. The order wasn't issued till August of 2020. So, you know, 10, 11 months, you know, of time to remove items. And once again, if items were removed, it wasn't enough to, you know, bring the property into compliance. You know, I did just give him a month. So the order was issued on the 10th of August, and I had given him till the 14th. So just over a month. My fear with, you know, giving him another year or giving him 6 months or 8 months would be that come at the end of that time, so another 6 or 8 months, that the same progress would have been completed as was from September of 2019 to August of 2020, which is, you know, not as much as I would have liked.
Anything else, Joe?
No, if you guys have questions, feel free.
Okay. Then that way we'll start around the horn again with Deputy Burton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually had another question from Mr. Lawson. I did have my sign up before we jumped on to Joe. Would it be appropriate to ask Mr. Lawson a question?
I think we can probably allow that. We're trying to get as much information before we have to make a decision. So while it's not necessarily in order, it certainly follows under questioning and evidence. So please go ahead.
So, Mr. Lawson, I just want to clearly understand what's happened over the past year. So you've had a year to clean this up. You talk about loads to the landfill, then you talk about loads to the Creedmoor. So are we talking separate loads? You took 3 loads to the landfill. How many loads did you take to what you call Creedmoor, which I assume is the metal recycling place in Creedmoor?
I'd say approximately 8.
So you've taken 8 loads of metal to recycling and 3 loads to the landfill. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. Okay. So now I have a better understanding. Okay. I'll wait to the comment end. Joe, I don't think I have any questions for you. I think you've made it. You've well documented everything. So I'm good that way, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your tolerance on that.
Okay.
Let me ask some questions.
Thank you. Member Davidson, questions for Joe?
Yes, thank you. I think Joe, in his statements here, has made it clear that the goal is to have the materials removed from the site as opposed to masking the debris. I've lived in Stayner for 20 years now, and a lot of that has been there for 20 years. Mr. Lawson used to be an employee of the County of Simcoe with their waste management system, and that's where a lot of the initial stuff came from. But I can also appreciate from Mr. Lawson's perspective that these are items that he's collected and he's having difficulty parting with it. So after my long preamble, my question to Joe is there, do you see an alternate way out to improve the physical appearance of the property without Mr. Lawson parting with he is deemed to be collectibles?
So I have had discussions with Mr. Lawson, and I've said on multiple times, I'm like, don't put up a fence, don't hide it, don't waste your money doing that, because it doesn't get doesn't get rid of the problem. A temporary shed is fine as long as it's temporary. If he wants to put it there and organize some of the items and get rid of it, sure, that's great, but it's in the name, it's temporary. The best solution for Mr. Lawson, if you would like to keep some of these items, would to build a permanent garage, a permanent structure, and store some of those items inside. The problem, there's quite a bit of items there. So I'm not sure what Mr. Lawson deems as keeping and what is recycling. But in order to store all those items, it would have to be a fairly large shed, which I'm not sure if it would even be permitted on that property. So in the order, it says remove the items, but if he can store them inside a permanent structure, then that's fine.
Anything else, Member Davidson?
If I understand the process, I'll have an opportunity to ask Mr. Lawson a question in the next phase.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Member Fanton, your turn for Joe.
So Joe, I understand, I just want to repeat this all again. I understand that a fence is not technically acceptable. And a temporary shelter is, as you said, temporary. And I agree with the fact that a permanent structure would have to be very large by looking at what's sitting there right now. So
that's correct. If Mr. Lawson wants to put up a fence, that's totally fine. That's not an issue, but the items are still there and it won't comply with the property standards order. If Mr. Lawson wants to put up a fence because he wants a fence, then that's great. But if the purpose is to put up a fence to hide the items, he's just wasting his money on a fence instead of getting rid of the items.
right. So really the cost of this permanent structure would most likely far exceed the value of what's sitting there.
Yeah, I don't know the value of what's sitting there. Like I said, in my opinion, a lot of it is just scrap metal. I'm not sure how much, what percentage is usable and is realistically usable. Like, is Mr. Lawson realistically going to use these materials in his lifetime? I don't know.
Right. I think that's all, Dave.
Dan? Sorry. Anything else, Dan?
I think that's all. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, thank you. Chuck, any questions for Mr. Paddock?
Joe, is this property zoned residential or any other, for any other use other than a residence?
I mean, it might be zoned rural. I don't have it in front of me. I can pull it up here. But you know, outdoor storage of items, of scrap items is not a permitted use really in any zone except for, you know, a recycling place.
Thank you, Joe.
No problem.
Joe, I've got a rather strange question, but I'm hoping it will make some sense. In your order on, it quotes bylaw sections and it's 4.1 and it talks about the exterior property area.
Mhm.
Under that are a series of A, B, C, D, so on and so forth. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, it sounds like a strange question, but it gets to a point. Under item B, it talks about insects termites, rodents, vermin, and other pests. And under C, it talks about noxious weeds and excessive growth of other weeds and so on and so forth. I'm going to ask you in a second, did you see any of this? And here's my preamble. Again, it sounds like a strange question. But if you, during your inspection, actually saw some of this stuff, in my little mind, we move from something that may not be as serious to something a little bit more serious. For example, if you actually went out there and saw rats and lots of rat droppings and so on and so forth, or you went out there and the noxious weed include giant hogwort or whatever the weed is and so on and so forth, in my little mind anyways, that would be a bump up. So my question is fairly straightforward. Did you just state the section that you're quoting, or like quote the section that it falls under, or did you notice some of these other things too?
So I quoted the section in its entirety. I don't like to leave it out. I don't want someone reading the order and seeing A, C, F, that kind of thing. So, you know, F, G, H are really the main sections to focus on, are really the items that I saw there. Maybe A, some rubbish, garbage, that kind of stuff. I did not see any sign of rats or mice or any termites, anything like that. Or I didn't see any noxious weeds either. It's just the section in its entirety.
Yep. Okay. And once again, Joe, I can appreciate that. And I just wanted to clarify though, because as I say, in my little mind, if we've got rubbish and excess metal and say a mess or whatever it may be, but we also have other concerns about pests and lots of coons and rats and so on and so forth, or an excessive growth of noxious weeds. Anyways, thank you for your clarification. That is all that I've got at this in terms of questions for you, Joe.
Okay.
Okay, that brings us to the next section or the next phase of the hearing. It is entitled arguments. I would more friendly to me would maybe be additional information, a further discussion. So with that in mind, and from what you've heard, Mr. Lawson, is there anything else that you would briefly like to add? You've got sort of idea of the questions that have been thrown around. And so is there any further information that you can provide to the committee?
No, there's nothing lives around me. I'm a killer of everything. And I don't care what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. I believe, Mr. Davidson, you had an additional question that that might be appropriate to ask at this moment.
Thank you. So, so to summarize, Fred, your position, you want to erect some type of temporary facility to contain the items until such time as you can initiate a series of yard sales to sell what you can and dispose of the rest. And you've talked to them at Canadian Tire about erecting, I take it this is some type of pole and tarp structure, is that correct?
A car garage.
So it's like a solid-sided type structure?
Oh, I guess plastic or whatever they are. It's a car garage.
Sean, you've got your mute on, sorry.
Yeah, I'm holding the button here. Sorry, I forgot. So like the pole structure with the tarp and it's large enough to hold a full-size car kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes.
How many do you think of those you need?
Well, if I have one for a yard sale, and then the other stuff for my push lawnmowers and that, and I'll have for my riding lawnmowers, I'll have another one. They go back to back,
All right.
but I want one for.
So
yard
Joe,
sale.
now Joe, do our bylaws permit those type of structures?
Temporarily, you know, well, what temporary means, I guess, is you can argue it either way. But like the few lawnmowers and the riding lawnmowers, those aren't the issues. The issues are the big pieces of just metal that are just there. So if that's great that he wants to have a yard sale and sell some lawnmowers and some ride-ons and some things like that, but those aren't the problems causing the issue. It's the large amounts of just metal that appear to me not to be usable. Or if they are usable to, very specific thing that, you know, people could just buy new. Example for like a lawnmower barrel, sorry, a wheelbarrow, you know, like the barrel of the wheelbarrow. He's got a number of those, but you know, how many people look for a used wheelbarrow?
Okay. I think that's all that I have. Thank you.
Mr. Burton, I saw your sign up. Would you like to, during this argument phase, throw in an additional question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Lawson, I'm going to start with the preamble. You know, you've had lots of time to get rid of some of this stuff, and you've made some sort of an attempt to get rid of stuff. The question I have for you is, of the stuff that is remaining on your property right now, how much of that, in your opinion, you could get rid of in a very short period of time by taking it to recycling? How much of it is not stuff you're going to sell at a garage sale? And how much, what percentage you say, could it be 40%, 50%? Could be, you could spend the next 30 days and just make multiple hauls to Creemore, as you refer to it, to the scrapyard and get rid of, and then use your temporary shelter to store the other stuff. When I look at the pictures, you have a large volume of stuff that is not going to fit into one thing. So my question is, how much of it would you consider and be prepared to get rid of on a short-term basis rather than dragging it out? And how much would you want to retain to put into your temporary storage facility?
Well, I'll have approximately 2 to 3 loads to take to the metal. I'd say roughly 3 loads. I get it all cut up.
So what percentage of the stuff that's on, what percentage is that of the stuff that's sitting on the property now? Is that 10%, 20%? Give me an idea.
I'd say 20% maybe. I don't know.
So you're saying 3 loads would get rid of, what you could do in the very near future would get rid of 20% of the product that's, or objects that are sitting there. You would be left with 80%, which you want to put into a temporary storage facility until such time that you're able to have a garage sale to get rid of it. Is that the idea?
10%. Yeah, so for garage sale, there's core to the stuff for a yard sale.
You're saying 25% of the stuff would be gone in a yard sale? Is that what I heard?
No, there'd be more than that. There'd be 40% of it. Roughly 40%. I don't know. So to clear what I'm asking and what you're stating to me is, you're saying you could get rid of 20% of the stuff that's sitting around now in a very short period of time by simply hauling it to the metal recyclers, and then you have another 40% that you could dispose of once COVID is over and you're able to hold a garage sale or a series of garage sales
which would be 60%. So you're saying that 40% you want to retain for your own personal use or your own personal collection. Is that a safe assumption of what you're telling me?
roughly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Dan, anything else during this particular phase for Mr. Lawson?
I actually just had one quick question for Joe. I noticed in the pictures that there's quite a number of propane tanks sitting there as well. Is there a limit, a bylaw of any kind for having something like that accumulating on the property?
I don't believe it's specific to a number. It's not in the property standards bylaw. It may be under zoning. I don't have that answer for you right now, but I don't believe so.
That's all.
And Chuck, under the additional further discussion argument phase, anything that you would like to ask either gentleman?
Not at this time. I believe that I have a good picture of what's going on.
And just to wrap this up, Joe, I don't have any further questions of either you, but I will give you, under this phase of the hearing, anything else that you would like to mention very briefly, and try not to be repetitive as that we've heard so far, but anything else?
My only worry is, if we say to Mr. Lawson, yeah, it's a good idea to get a temporary garage and put your things inside, that's fine, that's great. But it doesn't remain temporary, and then it still leaves issues for me under other bylaws in the future. So the purpose of this order was to remove the items from the property, not necessarily to screen or hide them from everybody. It's to get rid of them.
And I guess Mr. Lawson will give you the last word. We've gone around the horn a number of times. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or any rebuttal, any comment?
Okay, there's 2 propane tanks out there. They're full of propane right now. The rest of them are up at the landfill. I took them to the landfill when I took my other loads, or that second or third load I took up. But I got a load to go up Friday, and then next week I got a load or 2 to go to Creemore, maybe 3 loads.
Thank you very much. I think everybody has had an opportunity to ask questions. I think everybody has had an opportunity to provide answers to those questions and provide a clear picture of the situation. At this time then, I would say that we're probably entering into the decision phase of the hearing. And at this time, normally pre-COVID, we would ask both Mr. Paddock and Mr. Lawson to leave, and be a discussion of the committee members. I would like, if I could please, from the committee members, the other thing we can do is have a discussion kind of offline, officially, without the remaining parties. Just a second, Mr. Burton. And we can issue a written order. So what I'm looking for from the committee members, and this may be where you're going, Gary, is does everyone believe that we have enough information to allow Mr. Paddock and Mr. Lawson to take a 10-minute reprieve or a 15-minute reprieve and make a decision here today? And Mr. Burton, I will now let you give your 2 cents or 5 cents.
Thank you. I believe the clerk can move Mr. Paddock and Mr. Lawson into what they call a waiting room. So they can remove them, put them in a separate room, a virtual room where they're not accessible to our discussions. That's the only point I wanted to make. So,
okay. Thank you. I was looking for that, and actually I had sent an email this morning to find out if that was possible. Thank you, Barry. All right, at this moment then in time, I would ask both Mr. Paddock and Mr. Lawson to be isolated